All right. Hello, everyone. This is Dennis Harrigan with Connecticut Wealth Management, and I'm joined again by Kevin Leahy, who is the CEO of Connecticut Wealth Management. And we have, as a guest today, someone I know everyone is going to find very interesting what he has to say. Angel Pérez is currently, at least this week, is the Vice President of Enrollment and Student Success at Trinity. He is starting a new job on Monday as CEO of the National Association of College Admission Counseling. I get that right, Angel?
You did, yes.
Awesome.
Except I start in July, not Monday.
Oh, in July. Oh, you get a little bit of time off.
Yes.
Look at that. I think you've earned that. And I know Angel through the board at Hartford Youth Scholars, which we both have served on, and it's an awesome organization. So, Angel, thanks for spending a few minutes with us here this morning. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So, the reason why we wanted to chat with you, Angel, is because, well, a couple things. I've got two kids that are theoretically going back to college in the fall. Kevin has two kids that are theoretically going to college in the fall. And a lot of people are wondering what the heck is going to happen in the fall. UConn just announced yesterday their plans for the autumn. So I guess what we're really wondering is how has the pandemic affected your plans for the fall, including financially? Just tell us what sort of pressure you guys are under.
Yeah, and I speak for Trinity, but I speak for really all of my colleagues in higher education across the country. We're all going through the same thing and really working collaboratively. Actually, in Connecticut, all of the college and university presidents have been trying to collaborate and see what we can learn from each other, but try to do things together as opposed to separately. Right now, most institutions are behind the scenes really trying to create different scenarios and tracks as to what the fall might look like. While I think every single school has an intention of opening in the fall, we want nothing more than to be open and receiving students in the fall. We also know that there's going to be a lot of complexity, and we also know that we are basically at the will of the governor. And so what we are doing is we're preparing for a fall reopening with trying to follow all of the guidelines being provided by the governor with social distancing, how do you separate students, creating single rooms for students, medical testing, all of those kinds of things. So we're working pretty quickly to see what would that look like in the fall. But at the same time, we're creating what we're calling parallel tracks. What does an online semester look like if in August we have a resurgence of the virus and we are told we cannot reopen? So we need to be able to pivot really quickly. So for example, the faculty at Trinity are working on what would the online semester look like for them. And then the third one is, what does a hybrid model look like, where we have some of our students on campus knowing that residential campuses cannot have the same number of students they had before, because then there's no way we're going to be able to socially distance. So, our residential life staff, for example, has been going through each and every single room and trying to figure out, okay, how many students can we actually have if everyone has their own room and you don't ideally have people sharing bathrooms, for example. That is going to limit the number of students that we can have coming back. And then Model 4, which we're not currently considering at Trinity, but I know some of my peers across the country are considering, is what if you move up the entire academic year? September is sort of this sacred time in higher education. Who said it has to be September? It could be October, it could be November. And then maybe for 1 year, we're off cycle until July or August, and then start again. So that's a model that some of my peers across the country are looking at. The last thing I'll say to answer your question about the finances, this is wreaking an extraordinary amount of havoc financially. How do you predict a financial model where you actually can't bring in all of your students? And I forgot to mention, there's no way some of our students will even be able to get to us. Right now, borders are closed. Embassies from the United States abroad are closed. And so we do not see a scenario where our international students are going to be able to get to us in the fall. You may have heard that the United States is not going to be accepting flights from China. So there's really an extraordinary amount of trickle-down effect that's going to have on higher education, because we are international campuses. So right now we're thinking about how do we model tuition for an online model, because you can't charge the same amount of money that you would charge online than when you would be in person. Obviously, if we cannot have students return to campus, or if we have fewer students, that is going to mean less money in room and board fees, which is a huge revenue generator for institutions. And then to complicate things even more, we're trying to work with the Department of Education on their financial aid guidelines, because every pricing model we put out there, the Department of Ed has to approve for financial aid. So this is a very, very challenging time for higher education.
So Angel, is it fascinating? Is it safe to say that there will likely be no one model, a one size fits all model? I got to imagine, to your point, it, some schools have a lot of international students. I imagine other schools do not. Some schools, of course, the elite ones have billions of dollars in endowment, and many others do not. So I got to imagine, perhaps, like it or not, some of those things beyond the control of the universities, uh, including and even excluding COVID, are going to drive some of this.
Yeah, I think, we really are at the mercy of external factors, and I do think you're right. One size does not fit all. I think many institutions are going to have to do what's right for them, and many institutions will be able to do what they can afford to do, because so many colleges and universities do not have a lot of resources. I think one of the wake-up calls for our legislators, both in the state but also in the country, is this: when they started to realize that colleges and some schools in this country are 3 months away from going bankrupt if they don't collect tuition. Um, Personally, I don't think that's the kind of country we want to be, and we need to make higher education a priority in our funding through the government. But that's where we are, and so I do think colleges are going to use different models. But at the same time, we may be forced to just do what the governor tells us to do in the end.
And of course, you've got 50 different governors. So, what if the New York state governor says something different from Governor Lamont and the governor of Massachusetts? And you've got students, of course, coming from what you guys probably have roughly 50 states worth of students, right?
Yeah, and all of our students at Trinity, 15.5% of them are from abroad, and so that's also going to complicate our situation as well.
Wow. I've heard I heard some people talking, Angel, about perhaps taking a semester off. Some students have talked about taking a semester off, working, whatever, maybe even just taking online classes at some of the lesser expensive, just online universities. Is that possible? Like, what would the colleges and universities, how will they handle that?
It's a great question. So this is the time of year we usually, pre-COVID, start getting gap year requests, right? And students who want to study abroad for a year or volunteer for a year. I actually am really surprised that I have not seen as many gap year or gap semester requests as I thought I would by now. I think a part of that has to do with the fact that what students would traditionally do during a gap year and a gap semester, they are not going to be able to do. You're not getting on a plane and going on a trekking trip, through the Andes. It's just not going to happen. And so I think students are thinking twice about, well, maybe if I can't do that, I should just do something with my time and be in school. What we are preparing for in higher ed is that when colleges start announcing exactly what the fall is going to look like, that there may be last minute gap semester and gap year requests, because families may not feel comfortable with that. I think there are some families that are feeling a little worried about sending their children to these, the way that I describe higher education to friends of mine, I said, we are cruise ships. Like, remember the beginning of this crisis, people said, you don't want to go on a cruise ship. Well, everything we do is about close proximity in highly residential environments. We eat together, we're in the dorms together. It's very difficult to social distance. So I think some parents will be very concerned about that. But in general, we haven't seen as many as we predicted we would see. Where I think you'll see the rise is international students who can't get to us and asking for that time. But colleges are going to be providing that hybrid model. So for some students, they'll say, well, if you can't get to us, just start taking courses online with us and then join us in January or join us next year.
And it's possible, I imagine, that although it sounds like you've received some positive news in terms of not have a lot of fall off, it's still possible that kids don't show up, right? I think, depending on, right, I think most, being a parent like Dennis with kids in school, the reasonably modest deposits, at least compared to the total tuition that one has to give. So it's totally possible. Is that fair to say that kids in significant numbers may not show up come September?
Yeah, I wrote a piece for the Chronicle of Higher Education, and my argument was this may be the first year that for many colleges across the country, you won't know how many students you have or what your budget looks like until the day they show up. And a lot of that has to do with the pandemic, but a lot of that also has to do with the fact that actually the association that I'm going to, the National Association for College Admission Counseling, was sued by the Department of Justice last year because they felt that having basically what they called collusion between colleges and universities, where students commit on May 1 to a school and can't entertain offers from other institutions, was against federal guidelines, and they won. And so those guidelines were removed, which means this is the first summer where colleges and universities can poach students from everywhere, even if they have already deposited somewhere else. And so what we are seeing is more discounting happening. So colleges saying, I know you committed to X school, but we'll give you a $20,000 scholarship if you come here. So it's going to be a really interesting summer because you have COVID, but then on top of that, you have the Department of Justice ruling, which makes it okay for colleges to become extremely competitive over the summer.
So Angel, let me turn that around. And so if a student perhaps was a full pay, right? There was an ability to, might they be even more attractive at an institution now than before? Said another way, might a kid who's borderline or maybe even below the bar gain admission to a school because they're full pay?
Absolutely. I mean, the reality of the matter is many schools across the country are under such financial distress. And if a student can pay full tuition, that is very attractive to many institutions. And one of the ways that institutions are trying to attract some of those students is through discounting. And so saying, I'll give you a merit scholarship for $20,000. Well, if we cost $70,000 and we give you a $20,000 merit, we're still netting 50 for the institution. So there's a lot of that happening behind the scenes. I predict it will continue over the summer. My sadness about that is that I think it's not good for kids. And you know, I wonder your perspective as parents, but you know, the reality is students need structure and students need to make a decision and stick with that decision. I did like the May 1st deadline, the fact that everyone knew and then students started getting excited over the summer and planning for that. It's hard to imagine a scenario when August 15th, your child might still be making a decision about where they start on September 1st. I think that's tough for students.
Yeah, especially when, you know, these kids, and we tried to counsel our kids, they think that this decision, this singular decision, determines the rest of their life. And to wait and have it make that decision in the 11th hour, I can't imagine. I recall the stress we had on April 29th a few years ago. I can't imagine delaying that all the way to August.
Yeah.
Hey, Angel, one more question I have. You know, the long-term impact of this pandemic on many different industries, we don't yet know, and we're all trying to figure that out. And we, at our firm, we have an innovation committee where we're trying to figure out how do we move forward and how do we get better in light of this, you know, the new world. What do you see changing long-term in the world of higher education?
Yeah, I wish I had a crystal ball, but I don't. But I will say, and I believe this, my colleague and boss at Trinity believes this, the president, that we will be different on the other side of this. There is no way that we would go through such a fundamental, inflection point and not be different. I do think there will be trickle down effects on this. There will be some institutions, those that were already hanging on by a thread, who will not make it post-pandemic. There will be other institutions that will make it, but have used this opportunity to really rethink their entire model. I'm an optimist, and I always say, don't let a good crisis go to waste. Well, this is a great crisis, if you will, and I'm not trying to make light of it. What I'm saying is this is a great opportunity to question what we do and how we do it. Institutions of higher education don't tend to be flexible or nimble. They're very traditionalist, and this crisis has forced us to put students first. And to really try to meet them where they are. So I do see opportunities for institutions to become more student-centered, to really also maybe rethink their financial model. And my greatest hope is that because the government has had to intervene in higher education. I mean, we got some bailout funds and all of that as well, that maybe this brings an awareness so that the next time the Higher Ed Reauthorization Act happens, that we think about funding higher education differently. Because the reality of the matter is, if you think about everyone that's dealing with this crisis right now, doctors and nurses and, financial planners, everyone needs higher education. This is extremely important in our society, but the way we fund it certainly doesn't send that message. So my hope is that maybe on the other side, funding looks different as well.
Angel, I can't help to follow up on that a little bit. I'm not sure whether you meant to make this point or not, but it's been suggested, at least I've heard some people suggesting that, institutions that aren't ultimately acutely career oriented, said in another way, or the opposite of that perhaps would be a traditional liberal arts, institution. Will the liberal arts institutions be the more broad-based institutions be more challenged to survive on a going forward basis than those that are truly provide? You use the examples of nursing or financial planning that are really truly preparing for a singular future.
Yeah, well, I admit my bias. I'm a liberal arts grad, and I've only worked at liberal arts institutions in America. So believe deeply in the product. But at the same time, I've seen a massive shift over the past decade of liberal arts colleges really needing to meet the marketplace. And I do think there's a nice combination of the liberal arts and what it can provide, but also, the way we talk about it at Trinity is the practical liberal arts and the ways that you can apply it. I think, colleges and universities have to reinvent, put a lot of resource into their career development and outcomes areas, but also help. There's nothing wrong with putting together a traditional liberal arts curriculum with, practical business or medical or STEM. We're actually doing a lot of that at Trinity, and we actually partner with Infosys in downtown Hartford and have had this amazing partnership where Infosys trains our students on tech, and we train their employees on the liberal arts. And so I think that's a model of the future. But I do believe if you are a traditional liberal arts education, putting your stake in the ground and saying, we're just not going to change, the world is going to pass you by.
Well, I think that this topic and the survival of colleges and access to college for people of different socioeconomic means, the way it intersects with the current events of the day is stunning. And I just think it's so important what you folks at Trinity have committed to doing. And I know what you're going to do in your new job and what we do at Hartford Youth Scholars, making sure that people have the opportunity and not just those people that have the big wallets. So Angel, thank you so much for the last 15 minutes, but also for everything that you've done here in Hartford and at Trinity. You're an awesome friend of this area, this region. Thank you so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it. And good luck down in DC.
Great. Thanks for having me. Nice talking to you.
Angel. Good luck.
Done.